My name is Noah. I was born in a poor place. Life was always hard and dreams felt far away. My mother was kind. She worked every day. She was always tired, but she never stopped. We lived in a small one-room house. No hot water, no good lights. I slept on the floor with an old blanket. The roof had holes, but I never said anything. When I was 14, I started working. I cleaned cars, carried heavy boxes, and picked up trash from the streets. I did many jobs and brought money home. I gave it all to my mum and asked for nothing. She smiled, touched my face, and told me I was her hero, her strong boy. I didn't feel strong. I felt tired and small, but I smiled for her. Each morning I got up early, washed my face, wore old clothes, and left quietly. I walked through dust, past broken houses, and saw kids playing. But I kept walking. I saw rich people in cars, heard their music, saw their clean shoes. I stayed quiet. I didn't hate them. One day, my mum got sick. She coughed a lot and had pain. She couldn't walk. We had no money. No doctor came. I sat near her, held her hand, and cried. She told me, "Don't be sad." She gave a weak smile and said, "Keep going. You are strong." That night, she died in her sleep, in my arms, with peace on her face. I felt empty. The house was cold. Everything was quiet. My heart felt heavy. I had no one left, no family, no friend, just a photo of her in my pocket. I stayed strong. I left that house, said goodbye, and walked into a new life. I promised her I would try. I would be honest. I would be brave. I would never stop. I found work as a guard at a big house outside the city. The house was huge, with glass walls, big gardens, and quiet roads. The owners were rich and private. They had cameras and a big gate. I stayed outside, near the gate, sitting in a chair, watching the street. The wife, Mrs. Grace, was kind. She smiled often, gave me tea, and asked how I was. The husband was always busy. He didn't talk, always on his phone, always walking fast. They had a son, about 20. He looked angry and never said hello, just walked past. I didn't mind. I had a job, a small room, a little money, and some peace. I got up every day at 4 a.m., brushed my teeth, put on my uniform, and sat at the gate. I stayed until midnight, watching the house. I wrote in my notebook and stayed awake. Sometimes I read old books I found in the trash. Some pages were missing, but I loved them. I wanted to learn, to grow, to become more than just a guard. Then one morning, everything changed. Something bad happened, something dark. I opened the gate like normal. The sun was rising. The street was quiet. I was still sleepy. Then police cars came. Loud sounds, flashing lights, men shouting. They ran into the house, broke the door, pointed guns, and told me, "Don't move." I didn't move. I raised my hands. I stayed quiet. I was shocked. After a few minutes, they came out. Their faces were white. They looked scared. They found the family, dead inside the house, in blood. I felt sick. My hands shook. My knees were weak. I couldn't breathe. They looked at me. They shouted questions. They didn't wait. They grabbed me, pushed me down, handcuffed me, and put me in a police car, still wearing my guard uniform. They said I was the only one there. The cameras didn't work. No one else saw anything. I told them I didn't do it. I cried and begged, but they didn't care. They checked my fingerprints. They searched my room. They found nothing, but they said I had blood on my hands. The door had no damage. I was inside. They showed me photos. The blood, the bodies, the pain. I covered my eyes. I wanted to wake up, but it was real. They kept asking questions. Their faces stayed cold. I was only a guard. I had no gun. I had no hate. I told them I respected the family. I liked Mrs. Grace. She was good to me. But they wrote reports. They shook their heads. They closed the case fast. I was alone. No lawyer, no help. No one believed me. They gave me a lawyer from the government. He didn't care. He said very little. In court, I looked around. No family, no friend, no hope. I stood up and said I was not guilty, but my voice was small. The judge looked bored. The jury looked sleepy. My lawyer said almost nothing. Then I heard the word guilty. I heard life in prison. I fell to the floor. I was just 23. No one cried. No one shouted. No one cared. The guards pulled me away. The doors closed. A new life began. Prison was cold, dark, and full of noise, but also full of deep silence. Doors slammed loudly. Keys made sharp sounds. Guards shouted names. Lights blinked all night. I had no words, no strength, no smile, just a big empty hole in my chest. I sat on the floor, looked at the wall, and cried until I had no more tears left. My cell was small, with one bed, one toilet, one broken light, and a heavy metal door. The mattress was thin, the blanket was rough, and the pillow was flat. Nothing was soft. I shared my cell with another man. He didn't talk much. He just looked at me. One day he asked, "What are you in for?" I said, "I didn't do it." He laughed, not in a bad way, but like he had heard that many times before. He said, "We all say that," and turned away to sleep. That night, I didn't sleep. I looked at the ceiling and thought about my mother's voice. She used to say, "Even in darkness, you can find a little light." I held her words in my heart. Her voice, her love, her hope. These became my light. I didn't want to die inside. I didn't want to turn into nothing. I wanted to live. So I stood up, wiped my face, took a deep breath, and made a promise to myself. I will survive. I didn't know how. I didn't have a plan, but I had her memory. In prison, time moves slowly. Hours feel like days. Days feel like months. Years feel like forever. Every morning we stood in line, got bad food, sat in silence, or listened to shouting. Some men fought for no reason. Some cried in corners. Some stared at walls, lost. I stayed quiet. I stayed calm. I didn't fight. I just watched and listened. One day, I found a small library. Dusty books, old chairs, quiet walls. The librarian was a kind man with grey hair and a soft voice. He didn't ask much. He gave me books. Easy ones first, then harder ones. Day by day, I read more and more. Every word gave me power. Every page gave me hope. I learned to write better, speak better, ask better questions, and understand the world. I began to write letters, not to anyone special, just to the air, to the world, to myself. I wrote about my life, my mum, my job, the house, and the terrible day everything changed. I wrote about sadness, dreams, pain, lies, and the deep silence inside my heart. Some nights I cried again, when no one saw, when the walls felt too close. But I didn't fall. I didn't give up. I held on to something stronger inside. I started helping other men, teaching letters, reading with them, hearing their stories. Many were broken, but not evil, just lost, just forgotten by the world. Years passed, slow like cold winter, heavy like wet clothes. But I walked through it. I didn't count the days anymore. I just lived moment by moment. Then one day, something small changed, but it gave me a little hope. A volunteer came in. A young woman, soft voice, big smile, books in her arms. She sat in the library, asked for help, and needed someone to fix torn books. I said I would help, quietly, shyly, but she smiled and said thank you. She asked about my story. I waited, then gave her my notebook, full of pages. She read slowly, line by line. Her eyes filled with tears. She said, "This story should be shared." I said, "No one will care." She said, "I care." Those two words opened something inside me. She gave my notebook to a lawyer, one who helps prisoners. He read it all, took notes, asked questions, and said, "Let's see what we can do." I didn't trust it at first. I had heard lies before. But he came back again and again, asking for old files, photos, fingerprints. He worked with a team. They looked at everything, even the crime night details. He said something felt wrong. The story didn't fit. The truth was hiding. He asked the court to open the case again. It took months. Many papers, many talks. Then, after 12 long years, something big happened. They found DNA on broken glass, on a doorknob, and on a cup inside the house. That DNA wasn't mine. It was someone else's, someone the family knew well. They tested it, checked the names, and found the truth. It was a friend of the son. He had a criminal record, used drugs, and needed money. He left town after the crime, changed his name, started a new life. But truth doesn't hide forever. Truth always finds a way, like light through cracks. The news came to me in the library. The lawyer stood there, shaking and smiling. He said, "You're going home." I dropped the book. My hands shook. I couldn't speak. I asked, "Are you sure?" He nodded, eyes full of tears. He said, "You are free." After 12 years, 12 birthdays alone, 12 winters behind bars, I was finally free. They opened my cell. The guard looked at me with soft eyes this time. I walked down the hall. Other men clapped, cheered, and cried. Some said, "You made it." Some said, "Don't forget us." I nodded, heart full of feeling. I stepped outside for the first time in many years. I felt the sun on my face again. I had no bag, no phone, no coat. Just my notebook and a deep breath. No one waited for me. Not my mum, not a friend. Just the open sky. But I didn't feel empty. I felt alive. I felt something I lost. Freedom. And I told myself, This is not the end. This is my new beginning. I stood outside the prison. The sun was warm. The air felt fresh. I felt free. No one was there. No family, no friend, no welcome home. I had no money, no phone, no house, just an old notebook in my hand. I looked at the sky, gave a small smile, and started walking. The city looked new. The people looked busy. The world had changed. I watched cars go by, heard music, saw kids laughing. I sat on a bench. I watched birds fly. I watched people live their lives. I felt strange, happy but empty, free but also tired. My legs hurt. My stomach was empty, but my heart was still beating strong. I asked a man for water. He looked at me and walked away, fast. Then I saw a small shop with bread. I went inside. The woman there looked kind. I said, "Please, I'm hungry. I have no money." She looked at me, quiet for a moment, then gave me some bread. She poured tea in a cup, smiled and said, "Sit down, eat, rest a little." I thanked her. I almost cried. I hadn't felt kindness in so long. The tea was warm. The bread was soft. I felt hope again. I told her, "One day I'll come back. I'll pay you back, I promise." She just smiled and said, "You're already paying me by being kind." I left the shop with a full heart and walked without a plan. Every step was a new chapter. Every face a small reminder of life. That night I had no place to go, so I walked until I found a church. It was old, quiet, the door open, no one inside but me. I sat in the back, cold and tired, then lay on the floor to rest. I hugged my notebook close, closed my eyes, and whispered, "Thank you." The next day, I woke up early, stretched my arms, and smiled. I walked to a small park, looked for work, asked people if they needed help. Most said no. Some ignored me. One man told me to go away. But then an old man with a broom said, "Come here. You can help me." He cleaned the park every day, slowly, with care and pride. He gave me a broom, showed me how to clean, and smiled kindly. We worked in silence. Sometimes he hummed. Sometimes he told jokes. At the end of the day, he gave me a sandwich and some coins. He said, "You work hard. I like that. Come tomorrow again." And I did, every day for weeks, cleaning, sweeping, learning. He told me, "You have strong hands, a good heart. Don't give up." I told him about prison, about my story, and he didn't judge me. He said, "I know pain too. Everyone carries something." One day, he saw my notebook, asked, "What do you write in there?" I said, "My life, my thoughts, my story. It helps me breathe." He nodded and said, "The world needs to hear this. People need hope." He had a friend, a teacher at a small center who helps people speak. He took me there, introduced me, said, "This man has something to say." She smiled at me, listened to my voice, and said, "Come next week." That week, I prepared. I wrote my words again and again. When the day came, I stood in front of 12 people, nervous and shaking. My hands were cold, my heart fast, but I began to speak. I told them everything, from the beginning, my mother, my pain, the prison. I told them about hope, about reading, about dreams in the dark. They listened in silence, some with open mouths, some with wet eyes. When I finished, one woman clapped, then another, then all of them. They hugged me, thanked me, said, "Your story is powerful. Don't stop." I walked home that night with light in my heart. Something new had begun. The teacher told others, and soon more people wanted to hear my story. I spoke in libraries, in schools, in small halls with folding chairs. Every place I went, I saw new faces, new hearts opening. People cried, people clapped, people hugged me like family. One night, after a talk, a woman came to me with a notebook. She said, "I'm a writer. I want to help you write your story." We sat together for weeks, remembering every part, every feeling. She wrote it all carefully, slowly, page after page, truth after truth. We called it The Boy Who Kept Walking, and it felt right. A small publisher agreed to print it. He said, "This needs to be shared." I didn't believe it, not at first, until I saw my name on the cover. When I held the book in my hands, I cried. I couldn't speak. The book went out, one copy at a time. People read it. People shared it. I got letters, emails, messages from strangers saying, "You gave me hope." One woman wrote, "My son is in prison. Your story made me believe again." Another said, "I wanted to give up, but your words saved me." The story grew, faster than I could understand, bigger than I imagined. I was invited to events, to speak to crowds, to share the truth. I stood on stages, not as a hero, not as a star, but as a survivor. I told them, pain is real, but so is hope, and you are not alone. Some people didn't believe it, said, "It's too sad, too lucky." But most people cried, thanked me, held my hand and said, "Keep going." The world was listening, not just to me, but to all the forgotten ones. And I promised I would never stop speaking for those who can't. Days passed. Weeks turned into months, and my story reached more people. I started traveling, speaking in cities far away from home, to places I'd never seen. It wasn't easy, traveling alone, staying in strange places, but I felt alive. Every time I spoke, every person I met, it was like I was building something new. I met other survivors, people with their own stories of pain and hope. One man named Daniel had been through worse than me, yet he smiled every day. He told me, "The past doesn't define us, but how we move forward does." Those words stayed with me. I shared them every chance I got. My book was growing. People were buying it, reading it, passing it on. I received messages from readers in different languages across the world. They said they felt less alone, that they were finally seen, heard. It felt like a dream, but I knew it wasn't. It was real. It was happening. There were moments of doubt, days when I felt tired, like I couldn't continue. Sometimes I would wonder, is this all real? Is this really my life now? But every time I saw someone's eyes light up, every time they said thank you, I knew the answer. Yes, this is real. This is my purpose. This is why I kept walking. I started getting invited to more important events. Bigger stages, brighter lights. Once I spoke at a university in front of hundreds of students, future leaders. I shared my story, the pain, the redemption, and the importance of not giving up. At the end, a young woman came up to me, tears in her eyes, and hugged me. She whispered, "You've changed my life. I was about to give up on my dreams." Those words meant more than any book or speech ever could. It wasn't about fame, money, or applause. It was about touching lives. And I realized that's the real reward. That's what makes it all worth it. I still remember the first time I walked on a big stage in front of a crowd. My hands were shaking. My heart was racing. I almost couldn't speak. But then I remembered my story, my pain, my lessons, and I began to talk. I spoke of strength, of surviving, of the light after the darkest nights. After that speech, something changed. People started calling me a hero, but I didn't see it that way. I was just a man who kept moving forward. A man who refused to let the world break him, who refused to let hope die. I wasn't a hero. I was just someone who wanted to share what he had learned. The invitations kept coming, and so did the questions. How did you survive? The truth was simple, but hard to explain. It wasn't about strength. It was about hope. Hope that things could change. Hope that pain wasn't forever. Hope that I wasn't alone. And every time I told that story, I saw it in the eyes of others. They understood. As I traveled more, I learned about the world's pain, its struggles, its injustices. I met people who were fighting for their rights, fighting for their freedom. I saw children with no food, families living on the streets, people in prisons. I began to think, maybe my story wasn't the only one that needed to be heard. So I decided to do more, to help in ways I never imagined before. I started a foundation to help people like me, people who had been wronged, lost, forgotten. We provided support, guidance, and most importantly, we gave them hope. It was small at first, but slowly it grew. People began to believe again. I visited prisons. I spoke to families. I met people who had lost everything. I sat with them, listened to their stories, shared mine, and said, "You are not alone." Every time I gave someone a little piece of hope, I felt like I was healing too. It wasn't just about my story anymore. It was about all of us together. I met with young men and women who had been through their own battles. Some had been in prison. Some had lost loved ones. Some had no homes. I told them, you can change your life. You can rise above the pain. And they listened. They believed. And they started to take steps toward their dreams. One day, I received a letter from a mother whose son was in prison. She thanked me for giving her hope, for making her believe that he would come home. She said my words had helped her son, that he was starting to write again, starting to dream. That letter made me cry because it wasn't just my story anymore. It was theirs too. I kept writing, I kept speaking, and I kept helping, because that was my purpose. I didn't know where this journey would take me, but I knew I couldn't stop. Every life I touched, every person who found hope in my words, made it all worth it. I was no longer just Noah, the boy who was wrongly accused. I was something more. Years passed, and I kept speaking. I met more people, heard more stories, and shared more hope. Every day, I learned something new about life and strength. I was no longer just a survivor. I had become a guide for others. I saw lives change, dreams rebuilt, and spirits rise. And in every smile, every tear of joy, I found my purpose. Through pain and suffering, I found redemption. I had walked through darkness, but now I lived in the light.